Another way that the top eight could get messed up is one thing we saw get dangerously close to happening was let's talk about Collingwood versus Port Adelaide. Now, this was an interesting game to be looking at, especially given the whole controversies and arguments and poking jabs at, the whole prison bar jumpers and this whole debate that's really kind of gone a lot more heat going, it feels like this season. I know we talked about that last season, but this season it really feels like there's a whole new fire to it. And the Power barely, by a literal point, avoid embarrassment in this game. They barely beat the Magpies, and it was a fairly ugly affair from either team. And I really, honestly, don't have too much to say about this game, Donnie. So you're going to take it away if you like. You get, especially if you want to talk about real quick, just talk about that first half of footy. If you were a Port Adelaide fan, and I've seen some of them on the internet, oh, you were crapping bricks at this point in time because they almost get out to a 30-point lead, the Magpies do. So this, I was actually, I know most of the AFL, yeah, you hate Collingwood. I'm just kind of hopping on that bandwagon, I guess. Man, I kind of wanted to see Port Adelaide go down in this bit of fashion because it would have been one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Apparently, we're not. If you're like me, you're not lucky enough to get that. If you're a Collingwood fan, you're not lucky enough to get that. If you're an AFL fan or a fan of Port Adelaide, you are extremely lucky that Adelaide kind of got their game in check, although they almost blew it late. Man, but besides this, I mean, Taylor Adams, Darcy Moore, Bo McCreary. I mean, those three guys just have a game for Collingwood, but Port Adelaide able to save themselves, save their reputation, and possibly save their spot in the top four.
Yeah, this was just one of those where Port had their stinker, and they had their stinker at almost the worst possible time because they Collingwood absolutely jumped all over them in the first half, uh,
Mm-hmm.
pulled out to a nice little lead, and they kind of held it most of the game. This Port looked inept going forward at times. It was rather disturbing. I know they didn't have Horacio Fantasia, but I was almost shocked at the ineptitude going forward in that first half. They started to kind of pick it up late, and then they really righted the ship in the fourth quarter, but they let Collingwood hang around when they should have been able to bury them. I mean, they took a 16-point lead there late in the fourth quarter and let Collingwood crawl right back into the proverbial cupboard, and they survived. But if I'm Port, I'm wiping my brow. I'm taking this tape. It's kind of like the Carlton game against Hawthorn. I'm taking a few positives you can find, which are not many, unfortunately. You fix a few things that are there, and you throw that tape into the fire because you don't want to remember that, because that is not a performance that you want to keep. If you're Collingwood, there are some signs of maybe some progression. Like I said, you just pushed a Port Adelaide team very, very deep into this game. You didn't let them blow you out. You performed rather well. Darcy Moore, oh, surprise, surprise, is a really good center half back.
Really? No
Wow.
idea.
I know. I'm
I
as much as I understand
think
Bucks
it's a
moving him
hairband.
as much as I understand Bucks moving him forward to give a different look, Darcy Moore plays the center halfback position better than most in the AFL. I don't understand it. Don't screw up your team by trying to fix another area because you're screwing up another part. So to see Darcy Moore back where he belongs, that center halfback spot, playing his position the way he is, I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
To see him play better, see him have more of a Darcy Moore type of performance. I think Collingwood is better with him there than anywhere else. Um, I don't know. This is just a game that was just kind of, you want to let it go.
Still a little bit of a problem with Port Adelaide, though, Donnie, because through these 10 rounds, they have 4 games against top 8 teams. 3 of those games they've lost. They lost to West Coast, they lost to Brisbane, and they lost to the Western Bulldogs. The only game out that they've beaten of a legitimate team is the Richmond Tigers that have now fallen out of the top 8. So the legitimacy and the claim of being a top 4 team right now for Port Adelaide, you're a top 4 team by merit of points in record alone. But in terms of the competition you've played, that you've beaten, and then the ones you lost to, this isn't really a top four team. This is a final team, not really a top four team.
Oh, it's kind of the argument, the flat track bully argument that I've heard several people come up with, and unfortunately, this game did not help that argument much in
Oh,
itself.
well, they haven't
But
been helping that argument the entire season, is what it seems like.
well, and the other crazy thing about it is the fact that the West Coast Eagles have been so Jekyll and Hyde that it's like that's even that loss there, it almost kind of takes on a little bit of a different notoriety because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't been as good as they probably should be. Now, the Western Bulldogs loss and the Brisbane Lions loss, if you really look at it, I mean, they make a ton of sense if you look at it the way it's going now.
Yeah.
Brisbane is one of the hottest teams in the entire league with 6-0 in their last six, only team to do that. And the Western Bulldogs are 5-1 in their last six. The only other team to do that is the Melbourne Demons. So it's really kind of crazy that Port's they're kind of being beat by a stick that really, if you think about it, most other teams would be okay with.
Mm-hmm.
But because they did so well last year, it's kind of being used as a negative on them. Again, we're 10 games in. They've still got games. They've still got games against Geelong. You've still got games against GWS. You've still got games against Freo. You've still got some of the
Sydney and Melbourne up there too. I mean, another
exactly.
game against the Western Bulldogs, another game against Adelaide.
Exactly. So
They
there's
have the
still
chance to prove themselves.
exactly. And they need
Will
to get
they?
healthy. They need to get healthy. Well, Lysette will be back here in a couple of weeks after his
Mhm.
suspension, after the showdown sling tackle, which I think is affecting them.
Yeah.
Laddams has stepped in and played well, but I think
Mhm.
Lysette is much more of an impactful player. You're missing Butters, you're missing Dersma, you're missing Cleary, you're missing some really key guys on this team that have played well. I think Dersma and Butters have been the two most missed players because they brought youth and athleticism into the midfield. Boak and Wines are great players, but they're one speed. They're not extremely quick players. They're great in the possession, get it out to Amon and their wingers who are a little bit quicker type of players.
Mhm.
They need Dersma and they need Butters to give them a change of pace in the midfield. And that's where I think teams are getting them is because Western Bulldogs have a lot of young, quick midfielders. Port didn't. Okay. Same thing with Brisbane. You've got McCluggage, you've got Lions, you've got Zorko. There's some change of pace and there's some speed there. Ollie Wines and Travis Boak are not the fastest of guys. And I think they got exposed in those games. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think if I'm Port, is that, and we don't know when Butters is going to be back. Unfortunately, there's some nerve damage. They're not sure when he'll be back. We're hoping he can return. They're just not sure.
Mhm.
Dersma, I think there's at least 3 weeks left for him. So right now, Port Adelaide is trying to survive till they get these young guys back to hopefully, like I said, improve. They're a good team. Their losses are they're way heavy on them, but I think it's because of who they've lost to. I think that they're weighing a little bit heavier, especially after last year going wire to wire, being the number one team in the entire league.
Yeah, of course, but that's kind of going to happen when you're a team like Port Adelaide is. You're going to have this pressure upon you. You're going to have a lot of these expectations. And if you fail to live up to those expectations, there is going to be backlash. I mean, that's just kind of the name of the game at this point. But I mean, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Port Adelaide at this moment. They're going to have to do a lot to really prove themselves as a legitimate threat to that premiership, at least in my eyes and the eyes of a lot of other people that I've seen. So it's almost a wait and see. We'll see what they do in the coming rounds. But as of right now, their season is a little wobbly at this point.